Goblin launch detected.
This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game has Mika, Eric, Maximus, and myself battling it out to see who's got the best deck at the table. I've decided to play Eric's Zask deck and show him how it's done, keeping a command tower, caustic caterpillar, rampant growth, tranquil thicket, foot bottom feast, mortuary, and a forest. Eric is playing his Depala deck and he wants to show off his vehicles that don't have blue, keeping an ancient den, command tower, 7 dwarves, colossal plow, Peace Walker Colossus, cultivator's caravan, and start your engines. Mika's going old school with Rith the Awakener, keeping Mirari's Wake, Crag Crown Pathway, Terramorphic Expanse, 3 visits, Domri Chaosbringer, a forest, and Eternal Witness. Max is playing his 5-color Garth One-Eye deck, which happens to have a gate sub-theme. He keeps Black Dragon Gate, Heap Gate, Mana Confluence, Baldur's Gate, Azami Lady of Scrolls, Explore the Underdark, and a Kelpie Guide. Max wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a Black Dragon Gate, picking blue for the other color, and passes. Mika draws and plays a Terramorphic Expanse. Eric's got a command tower for turn, and passes. I draw and play a Tranquil Thicket, which comes in tapped, and pass. Max plays a Heap Gate, and passes while Mika sacrifices the Terramorphic Expanse to find a Plains. Mika draws and plays a Forest. He casts 3 visits and finds a Temple Garden, passing. Eric draws and plays out an Ancient Den. He casts a Colossal Plow and passes. I have also got a command tower for turn, and I cast a Rampant Growth to find a basic and pass. Maximus draws and plays out Baldur's Gate. He then casts a Navigation Orb and passes to Mika. Mika draws and plays a Crag Crown Pathway. He taps 1 for a Soul Ring and still has enough mana at this point for Mirari's Wake and passes. Eric plays a Sundown Pass and then brings out Depala and passes to me. I draw and play a Forest. I cast a Caustic Caterpillar and sacrifice it immediately to destroy Mika's Mirari's Wake. I pass after that. Max draws and then cracks his Navigation Orb, putting a Basilisk Gate into play tapped and a Gond Gate into his hand. He then plays the Gond Gate and passes. Mika plays a Plains for turn and then casts a Harmonious Archon, which makes 2 humans with it, and he passes turn. Eric draws and plays 7 dwarves. He then uses Depala and the dwarf to crew the plow and goes to combat. He swings at Max for 4 since it's only a base 3/3 with the Archon, plus it gets +1/+1 from Depala. He gains 3 white mana and some life, and the plow then connects. In his post-combat main phase, he uses the mana to help cast a Peace Walker Colossus and passes. I draw and play a Llanowar Wastes. I then cast Zask and pass. Maximus plays a Mana Confluence, and then casts Traverse the Underdark, going to find 2 gates and gets the initiative, which at the same time finds him a basic land. He grabs a Selesnya Guildgate, a Gruul Guildgate, and an island, and he puts his gates into play. He then follows up with a Greenside Watcher and passes after that. Mika's got a Forest for turn and casts Vivian Reed, and upticks her. Going to combat, he swings a human token at Maximus, who declares no blocks. Max takes the 3, and Mika takes the initiative, grabbing a basic to his hand. He then plays out a Krenko, Tin Street Kingpin, and passes. Eric draws and shocks in a Sacred Foundry. He plays out a Surge Hacker Mech, dealing 6 damage to the Archon as it comes in. Once more, he crews up the Colossal Plow, and this time swings it at Mika. Mika chumps with a human token, and in his post-combat main phase, Eric uses some of the floating white mana from the Plow to help cast a Raider's Carve. He passes after that. I draw and play Attack Enuma. I then recast the Caustic Caterpillar with Zask from my graveyard, and then play out a Mortuary. Going to combat, I swing Zask at Mika, dealing some commander damage, but more importantly, grabbing the initiative. I go and find a basic, and pass. Maximus draws and activates Baldur's Gate for 6 green, and then untaps it with his Greenside Watcher to tap it again for 6 blue. He then casts a Zami, and follows up with 2 more untappers with a Kelpie Guide and Vizier of Tumbling Sands. Max then plays a Golgari Guildgate and passes. Mika draws and plays a Mountain. He casts Eternal Witness and brings back the Harmonious Archon, which he then recasts. Going to combat, he swings Krenko at me and a human token at Max. I take the 4, while Max takes the 3. In his post-combat main phase, Mika upticks Vivian and finds Glory, and then passes. Eric draws and plays a Castle Embereth. He plays out a Cultivator's Caravan, and then uses the Peace Walker Colossus to crew up the Colossal Plow. He also crews up the Raider's Carve with Depala and moves to combat. He swings the Plow at me and the Carve at Max. We both take the hits, and afterwards, Eric plays out an Outlaw's Merriment and passes. I've got a Forest for turn, and cast a Farseek to find an overgrown tomb. And then cast Deadly Dispute, sacrificing my Caustic Caterpillar. And I get to put the Caterpillar on top thanks to Mortuary. This has Zask milling me for 2, and then draw 2 and make a treasure. I then replay the Caterpillar, and after that, pass. During my end step, Max makes a treasure with the Heap Gate, and then taps a Zami to draw a card. Max untaps and in his main phase, uses Baldur's Gate to make a bunch of green mana, untaps it, and makes a bunch of red. He plays out Rhythm of the Wild, and casts a Bloom Tender, giving it haste. He then plays out Garth, giving him haste as well. Max then untaps the Greenside Watcher to untap the Baldur's Gate, and then makes 7 black mana, using it to help cast Grave Titan, which as it comes in, gains haste because of the rhythm. He uses the remaining mana to activate Garth, and is able to cast a copy of Shivan Dragon. Going to combat, Max swings the Grave Titan at Mika, who doesn't block. This has Max regaining the initiative, and he uses it to put 2 +1/+1 counters onto Shivan Dragon. After that, Max plays an island and passes. Mika draws and upticks Vivian. Going to combat, he swings Krenko at me and 4 goblins at Eric, making 5 more goblins on attack. Eric uses 7 dwarves to block one of the goblins and takes the rest, while I block with the Caustic Caterpillar. Before damage, I cast Costly Plunder, and once more put the Caterpillar on top thanks to Mortuary, and then mill 2 and draw 2. After combat, Mika plays out Domri Chaosbringer and upticks the Planeswalker to make a green mana. He then plays out Glory, giving it a counter from Riot, and passes. Eric rolls and gets a Rogue off the Outlaw's Merriment, dealing 1 damage to Vivian, and then draws for turn. He casts a Blasphemous Act, and Max responds by untapping a Zami twice, and then taps her 2 more times to draw 2 cards. There's no counterspell, and the board wipe resolves. Eric then plays Start Your Engines to animate all of his vehicles. Going to combat, he swings the Peace Walker Colossus at Vivian, the Carve at Domri, the Surge Hacker mech at Max, and the Plow at me. Each player and Planeswalker take their hits, and Eric gets to find a land from the initiative as he takes it. With the board all cleared up, he just passes turn. I draw and play a Canotech Scarab Swarm, exiling Mika's graveyard as it comes in to get rid of Glory. I sadly only make 1 insect token from this, and I follow up with a Transmogrant Crown and equip it onto the Swarm. I pass after that. Max plays an Urza Saga, and then casts a Smothering Tithe. He then replays Garth and moves to combat. He's given it haste thanks to the rhythm, and he smacks Eric with his commander to take back the initiative, and passes after that. Mika draws and gives Max a treasure. He then casts an Avenger of Zendikar, but Max responds by casting Spell Swindle, countering the spell to gain 7 treasures. Mika follows it up with a less exciting Cabaret Ascendancy now, and passes to Eric. Eric makes a Cleric with the Outlaw's Merriment, and then draws for turn. He uses the Peace Walker Colossus to animate the Colossal Plow, and follows up with a Restoration Specialist. Going to combat, he swings the Plow at Max to reclaim the boot, aka the initiative, and Max takes the hit. Eric gets to put 2+1/+1 counters onto his Specialist. He then replays Depala and passes. I draw and play Necroblossom Snarl. I recast Zask, and then play Caustic Caterpillar from the graveyard. Moving to combat, I swing the Swarm at Max and the Insect token at Eric to get the initiative. As I move to the next room, I put 2+1/+1 counters onto Zask with the Undercity, and after that, pass to Max. Max draws and uses Garth to cast Regrowth, getting Kelpie Guide back to his hand. He then casts the Kelpie Guide and gives it haste with the Rhythm of the Wilds. He follows it up with Old Gnawbone, and in response, I sacrifice the Caustic Caterpillar to blow up Rhythm of the Wild. Max, however, bolt bends it and changes the target to Mortuary. Max follows that up by giving Old Gnawbone +7/+7 by tapping Basilisk Gate, and then untaps the gate again with the Kelpie Guide, and activates it again to give it another +7/+7. Moving to combat, Maximus swings at me for 21, which I take, and he makes 21 treasures. He's regained the initiative at this point, and Max draws a card. He plays a Swamp for turn, and passes. Mika puts a card on the bottom of the Cabaret Ascendancy, and draws, and decides not to pay to deny Max the treasure. He plays out Rith, and passes. On his end step, Eric taps Depala to crew a vehicle, and pays 1 into her ability, but sadly doesn't find a dwarf or vehicle. Eric rolls for the Merriment and makes a warrior token, and draws. He then animates the Plow with the Colossus, and crews the Colossus with the Restoration Specialist. He crews up the Raider's Carve with Depala, and uses the tokens to crew up the Surge Hacker mech. Eric also spends 3 mana on Depala's ability, and gets to find 2 vehicles to put to hand. Going to combat, Eric swings the Surge Hacker mech at me, the Colossus at Mika, the Carve and Plow at Max. This has both Max and I dying, while Mika takes a hit, and Eric regains the initiative, making a 4/1 skeleton. In his post-combat main phase, Eric plays an Untethered Express, and with half the players dead, he feels pretty good as he passes. Mika draws and plays a Wooded Foothills, cracking it and losing 1 to find a forest. He then plays out Aurelia the Warleader and goes to combat. He swings Rith and Aurelia at Eric for 9, who has to take it, and pays for Rith's ability to make 8 Saproling tokens. He then goes for a second combat step, swinging again, and paying for Rith's ability once more, this time choosing green, to make 10 sapperling tokens. Mika also gets to go Depala with the initiative, and after that, passes. Eric makes a cleric token with the Merriment trigger and draws her turn. He plays a veteran motorist and scries 2 to the bottom. He follows up with a fleet-wheel cruiser and then starts crewing up his vehicles. Going to combat, he swings 2 clerics and his 4 crewed vehicles at Mika. Mika throws 11 sapperlings in front of the planes, trains, and automobiles, but still drops to 12. Eric then uses 3 white from the plow to help cast Crush Contraband, and targets Mika's only 2 targets, but sadly with Lethal Crackback coming, knows when he's beat and scoops it up. Game review time. So I was not expecting the game to end the way that it did. I don't think Mika was either, but that Aurelia off the top was super lucky, and basically allowed him to attack without worry, as it meant that he'd build up bigger and bigger amounts of blockers with those sapperlings. I was actually really surprised when Maximus hit me with Old Gnawbone, since I didn't really feel like I was the big threat. I think mostly he just wanted some guaranteed treasures to hopefully have a bigger turn, but sadly that didn't work out for him. I kinda got to show off what Zask is supposed to do, which is basically mill cards and use cards like Mortuary to guarantee that insects go on top and then keep milling stuff. It worked pretty well, and I got to use the Caustic Caterpillar a couple times, but outside of that I didn't get to do a whole heck of a lot, although it was more than I've ever seen Eric do with the deck. Eric's Depala deck was pretty sweet, and I'm actually kind of looking forward to having a game where we're only playing vehicles. Something with Shorekai, Depala, Greasefang, and maybe Kazuma. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.